Welcome to our podcast, where we discuss mindful consumption, personal style, and the quest for living a more intentional life. I'm Alyssa, and I'm a sustainable stylist.
I'm Christina, a shopaholic turned minimalist-ish.
And I'm Signe, a color consultant and slow fashion style coach.
Together, we will unpack the nuances of what it really means to be a conscious consumer and find more joy in what we have right now. So grab your tea, your coffee, whatever your favorite drink of choice is, and join us in the conversation. Let's go.
Woo, yay!
We're back with part 3 of our series. How are you guys feeling? How are you liking our series?
I'm loving it. I think
Yeah, me too.
I'm learning
we're
so much.
Getting like a 360-degree approach to
yes,
finding your personal style.
I love it.
I'm learning a lot because I feel like you guys are the experts when it comes to the things that we've talked about. So
that's nice. Me too.
I feel like an observer amongst a listener. You know, I'm part of the audience in the conversation, which I'm learning so much from you guys.
I love it. Same. I learned so much from you.
Yeah, me too.
I like it. We've talked about color analysis. We talked about body types and changing up some of the stereotypes and the narrative around that. So today we're kind of bringing it all together with the style persona, otherwise known as using 3 words, style adjectives. This is a topic that has become very popular over the past few years, largely in part to a really fantastic New York stylist, Allison Bornstein, who has really run with the 3-word method. And I think it's really helped so many people kind of develop their own personal style and give us some guideposts so that we can be more intentional in our style. I know Amy Smilovic from Tibby talks about it often, which is fantastic. Signe, you have a really cool sort of style persona methodology that you use. And I mentioned it way back, one of my very first YouTube videos when I talked about how to find your style. I talked about picking out 3 adjectives. So it's a really cool topic and a really neat way to be focused in your personal style. Dress with more intention, shop with more intention. So I think it's a really great part of the slow fashion conversation. I think knowing your personal style isn't frivolous. It's very important. So I think let's jump into everyone's 3 words. Can you both tell me what your 3 words are? Oh, and I just have to say, sorry, wait, before we jump in, I think it's really important to start by saying that these are not set in stone. I think a lot of us, again, we can get really hard into rules, hard and fast, but life changes, we change, our body changes, and that's the beauty of these words, is that you can kind of, they are not tattooed on your body. You can change them.
So can you explain to someone who's never heard of this, how would you what are the 3 words meant to do?
So they are pretty much a descriptor for you and your personal style to be used, in my opinion, this is just the way I use them, as guideposts when you are getting dressed, when you're adding things to your closet. So for example, my 3 words are classic, minimal, and undone. And I don't think that the 3 words have to be aligned to a lot of the fashion words that we're familiar with, like edgy or boho or whatever. They can really embody your personality. They could be something like the word bold or soft even, or organic and natural. So I tend to like to include something that touches on your aesthetic that you really like. Sometimes even personal values can come into play. I've had some clients use vintage as one of their words, so that they really like to include secondhand and that kind of thing. So yeah, a piece of an aesthetic, a value. And I also think a lot of people, it can be used and it can be very beneficial if there's almost an aspirational component in there, so that you're kind of dressing for who it is that you want to present to the world. And I think I like to add, when the seasons change, I find there's little variant you can kind of add, and it all can also depend on like where you're going, right? So your 3 words are kind of like your core personal style and how you want to present yourself into the world, and then depending on where you're going or what you're feeling, you can always like add a little bit of edge somewhere else. Did that explain it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well said. Yeah.
Okay.
I think to me it's also like kind of like what you said, Alyssa. It's a way to unfold rather than cover up, because obviously, like, and that's what we've kind of touched on before. That personal style is so much more than just the aesthetics and what we see on the outside. It's about like unfolding and like showing a little piece of who you are through the use of clothing and like without even saying anything.
I think Amy Smilovic says this, where if you can't describe yourself, then how can you describe your style? Like, how can you share who you are on the outside if you don't know who you are on the inside? So I think these 3 words really connect with what you value, like how you say who you value, what you value, who you are, and how you want to feel. And as you mentioned, Signe, what we wear and our style is how we communicate to the world without having to say anything. And and I think that's so cool because what you wear is a visual, but it is truly a feeling. Like we've talked about it so much on this podcast where it's really about like it's an essence that you exude, it's a confidence. Like if you feel really constrained and unlike yourself and what you're wearing, that comes through. And it really, to me, comes back to you wearing the clothes versus the clothes wearing you. But for me, like I would describe my 3 words as relaxed, minimal, and I'd say fairly classic. And if the clothes don't feel relaxed on my body, or if I don't feel relaxed in my essence, then I don't feel good and I feel fussy and don't feel confident, and I feel like I'm focusing on what I'm wearing rather than what I want to be doing or saying or interacting in the world. So I think understanding what your 3 words are and discovering them, of course, it'll help you shop, it'll help you get dressed, but it'll help you exude who you are and how you want to feel as you walk through the world.
Well, that clapping. That was
Mm.
beautiful. That was really beautiful.
I think it's also a way to kind of connect the dots. Like we've talked a lot about like styling tools and like styling do's and don'ts and stuff like that. And I think it's a way like knowing your keywords. I think we kind of talked about that in the previous episode, that it's even the most important thing to figure out what your adjectives are, because it's like it allows you to figure out what colors work for you and what proportions work for you, because it has to all be connected to those words, like those keywords. So it just allows you to kind of connect the dots a little bit more, and being able to, explore the world of styling and arranging clothes in a certain way, because you can all the time you need to kind of get back and check in with yourself, like, am I staying true to those keywords? I think my keyword, like, we probably have similarities when it comes to keywords. So my like main keywords, which is also my like dominant style personality, is definitely casual. And it's because I want my clothes to be like, I feel like even though you have that single keyword, there are other like additional keywords that you could kind of connect to that. To me, it's because I want my clothes to be comfortable. I want them to be functional. I want them to have like a relaxed look. And that's, I see myself as a rather relaxed, like open-minded person. And I also have like some things in my everyday life that require like functional and comfortable clothing. Then my other keyword is smart. Um, and this is just to ensure that I don't feel underdressed or maybe even sloppy. Like, especially if casual is like dominating your wardrobe, I think that that's probably something many people can relate to, that sometimes you just feel like, wow, I just look like I'm wearing sweats every day. I feel like I'm underdressed. So smart is really just a keyword or like an adjective that I like to have in there, because it makes me, it ensures that I kind of polish off my outfits so that I still feel like I've made an effort, but at the same time not look too done. And then I have effortless as the final keyword. And I think that for me, this is especially where that like, especially like the keyword edgy, like that comes into play. Like the aesthetics of like a more edgy style persona, where you have like washed out band t-shirts and leather jeans and like biker jackets. I really like that, but in like small parts. So I use that as again a way to add more personality to my outfits. I think for me it's rooted in being like, I love like old school rock music. I went to a Foo Fighters concert a few years ago, so I have that side within me. I have tattoos. Like I have a small part of me that really likes that whole vibe. Um, and I feel like these adjectives, they really make me connected. Yeah, just like you guys said, like it makes me connected to who I am, but also like the aesthetics and how I want to dress and kind of communicate that to the world. So it's a helpful way to keep a connection between your outer and inner self at the same time, which I feel like with style and with fashion, we can't really part those two. Like they're deeply connected.
I'm working on a special project about style, and there's something that I'm diving into sort of similar like this, and I want to call it like your style dial. And this concept I got from financial creator Ramit Sethi, where he talks about your money dials. So your money dials are essentially what you value when it comes to how you spend your money. So your money dial can be convenience, it can be health, it can be travel. Like what are the things that you value that you want to spend your money on? And you can, and depending on what those things are, you can like turn it up to 11 or you can turn it down. And I think that concept to me really does translate to style and these three style words, in the sense of like, Signe, you talk about how one of your, I would call it a style dial then, is casual. And if you turn it up really, really high, you might feel like maybe that's how you want to feel that day. But now I'm going to level this out and like turn it down with a little bit of smartness. And that's how I get back to that feeling of balance. And I think you can really, if you know what these dials are and these values are with your style, it also gives you freedom to play and dress in the way you want to feel. Like, if I decide that one of my dials is edgy this day, then, and maybe I really want to turn it up because I'm going to a Foo Fighters concert and you got to see Taylor Hawkins play. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's kind of cool that you can really play around with the levels and how,
Mhm.
whether it be balanced or if you want to really lean into that aesthetic and that sort of word or dial that day. I think it's
Yeah, I
kind of
actually
interesting.
always encourage my clients to put like a percentage on, not like a
Mhm.
set in stone percentage, but like
Yeah,
for
it's
me,
fluid.
yeah, exactly. Like just like you say, like 70%, or sorry, 75% of my style personality is probably casual, so that's the one that's dominating. That's like my basic wardrobe, and then I have 15% classic and then 10% edgy. And that's, just like you say, it's a really fun way to both make sure that what you have in your wardrobe is representing you as a whole, but also the way that you arrange the pieces in your outfits, so that, okay, if I'm wearing an outfit that is 80% classic, then I know I will feel too restricted and I will feel like too like dressed up, and it will feel almost like a costume. So it's not that um the classic pieces aren't right for me. I just need to arrange them in the right way. I really love that idea of like a style dial. I think that's really inspiring.
Mhm. Mine are minimal, or well, classic, minimal, and undone. And I think I mentioned this in one of our other episodes. In the summer, I tend to add in like that bombshelly, a little bit more vampy
Mm.
kind of vibe.
Va va voom.
Yeah, yeah, with the hair, the glasses. I don't know, but yeah. So that's yeah. Those are my three words. I tend to look at it. I love how everyone has these different. Like Christina has the style dial. Sina, you use the percentages. I always think of it as like a cocktail. like ratio. So it's
Oh,
like
that's so
Ooh.
fun.
1 part undone, 2 parts minimal, and like that's kind of how I do it. Like, how's the cocktail feeling? Like, is a little bit too.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I
I
don't know.
love
It's
that.
always food, okay? It's always food or like cocktails. I don't know, but like
Cookies and
cookies. Oh my
cocktails
god,
and
that's right. my cookie
It's a
recipe.
recipe, yeah.
yeah.
Always food.
That's a
Um,
good one.
but yeah, like I like looking at it as a little bit of a cocktail, and um, I think too, it's good when, and I'm sure you feel the same way, when your words are a little bit different. Like I love it when the clients or people's 3 words are completely different, because that's when you can come up with really interesting combinations.
Mhm.
Um, and I think too, from a slow fashion perspective, again, when we start seeing our clothes as having these almost like personality traits, it's kind of fun to know that you don't have to shop to add maybe like a little bit of edge, or a little bit of, like in my case, a more like undone factor. Like literally, like Christina, you were saying in another episode, like if I'm wearing a button up shirt and a pair of trousers, that feels really, really stuffy. But maybe I just untuck the button up shirt and it instantly
Mhm.
feels more undone. And maybe I leave my hair like a little bit wild. So that's the undone piece. So I think using your 3 words can really help you see your closet from a perspective of abundance, and being like, no, like I have the tools to dress without having to go out and shop and buy a whole bunch of new things. And especially as your 3 words are changing, right? Like you can use styling instead of shopping to to kind of reinvent yourself.
I think a lot of us already have our 3 words in our wardrobe too, whether or not you know whether or not you know what they are or know it's there. Like I talk a lot about how to find your personal style using the clothes you already have, and basically you can, when you do a night like a good declutter of your closet, everything that remains is what you have to work with. And it usually, when I've worked with people, is how they would describe their style anyway. Like what remains from that declutter is they can often describe their personal style by what is there. So I think a lot of us, even if we can't, if you don't have your 3 words figured out right now, if you go into your wardrobe or think about what it is you wear on a regular basis, to work, to play, to dates, to events, you can still see those. I still think those 3 words are going to be there, and you sort of inherently know what they are. So now the next step is really just sitting down and thinking about it with a critical eye, and just an intuitive one. Through knowing yourself and what you like to wear, you can sort of describe your style from there, and then that's when you can use those words to, shop a little smarter, and you can start identifying pieces and combinations based on those words, and even molding some pieces to fit into those words if you want to play around with your clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like you mentioned, Christina, that it's about like figuring out where to turn up the volume or turn it down, so that if, it always starts with your own wardrobe, even if you're satisfied with that or not. There's a reason why you reach for certain pieces over and over again. And so you need to figure out, like, let's say you get a new job where you suddenly need to dress more professionally, or you need to dress in a certain way. You need to wear more like office appropriate attire. Then that's the dial that you need to, just to use your word, Christina, that's the dial that you need to tweak and turn up the volume on, and then turn some of the others down a little bit. It just becomes more structured, rather than, again, kind of what we talked about in the previous episode, breaking up with some of the stereotypes, or challenging like stereotypes. I had a client recently she was really drawn to like the adjectives connected to bohemian style, but
Mhm.
she didn't like the stereotypical like bohemian way of like we always see with like big
Yep.
ethnic inspired patterns and like many different colors. And it's like, okay, how can you get in tune with that way of dressing? How can you kind of set that feeling on fire within yourself without dressing that way? I just think that's really amazing and very fascinating, that just like becoming aware of those words, how much of a life, like it's really been like a huge game changer for not only for like clients but even for myself. I feel like it's that it just gives you so much calm and confidence. It's
Hmm.
definitely like confidence building.
I find that interesting too, because I think this is where it's important to have, I think, at least 3 words. Like, if it was just bohemian, then, and I mean, if you love that, own it, go for it. But like, it can feel very one note and like feel very stereotypical. Like, oh, okay, so I just want to dress like I'm going to Coachella every day. And that's, I mean, again, if you love it, fine. But you can, I think, with more words at your service, it can help create a more everyday, realistic balance where you can take those elements that you love, whether it be boho, feminine, romantic, whatever. Um, and that way it doesn't feel like it becomes more personal, and it doesn't feel like you're this stereotype or this like
Mm.
meme of what that style, like what we think of when we hear some of these style descriptors.
Yeah, and I like the way that you said, Alyssa, that it's also about like the tension between the words. So, like, just to take that example again, like if you feel drawn to the bohemian, like feel the vibe, like the bare feet, kind of free, like spirit kind of vibe, but you don't necessarily like that stereotypical way of like Coachella kind of dressing. It's about figuring out, okay, well, if you have that as a keyword, like let's say that keyword is natural or like something like that, like natural or free or like something lighthearted like that, then your next keyword, maybe that could be classic, so that you have, or minimal, so that you have those two to kind of balance each other and create that
Mhm.
tension and make sure that it's it's still in a balanced way, and it's bohemian but done in a way that aligns with you and the way that you want to dress and present yourself.
Mhm. I think too it's really important to, like, I like how this exercise has become so much more ubiquitous on the internet, and more people share their 3 words.
Mhm.
Because I think the further away we go from using the traditional descriptors that we see in fashion, and like Christina, how you were saying, like it's great that we have uh, an abundance of words, like it's good to have at least 3 words at your disposal, because I think we identify clothing and style with these really strong visuals, and that kind of pulls us into the comparison game, or being like, I want to look like this. Whereas if we're using
Mhm.
words like organic, soft, natural, strong, bold, then we're disassociating fashion from style, or even consumption from style, I think, right? Like we can pull at a piece and be like, ah, this makes me feel soft and warm and open, versus I must own this floral print dress because it is X and Y and I will feel this way. So
Yeah.
I think getting creative and like whipping out the thesaurus when you're coming out with your 3 words, or going online and like watching Allison Bornstein, watching whatever content you like to consume, and really seeing what other people are using, so you can get like kind of going beyond just these fashion terms, and really
Mhm.
really turning them into descriptors that can help you figure out how you want to feel. Basina, I had a question for you, because you deal more, like you had the style persona. Is it very different from the 3 words? How does it differ when you talk about casual and the sub style kind of thing?
No, I think it's actually like the two are kind of connected, or at least I try to kind of connect them. So we have, the more stereotypical outer, when you go out into a shop, or even if you look at your wardrobe and you want to analyze the pieces, that's always, where the analysis starts, like the style persona analysis, like take out the pieces you wear the most and that you love wearing the most, and then you kind of analyze the aesthetics of these pieces. So there's like the outer aesthetic, like personalities, which could be something like classic and edgy and romantic, creative, um what's the final one, casual, and then I have one called simple, which is more like it's not minimal, it's more, it will be simple, but it will always be elevated, there will always be a little different elevated twist to that item. So that could be like the aesthetics, like the more broad stereotypical way of like analyzing certain pieces of clothing and the way they look. But then within each of these personalities, I always write a bunch of adjectives which are kind of connected, similar to the 3-word rule, where you say, okay, well, casual. What kind of adjectives or feelings are connected to this style persona? So that's, it's always important to talk about like the inner self and the inner experience of wearing that piece of clothing. But then, of course, it's not only about the specific piece of clothing. It's also, like you said before, Alyssa, like in the way that you style it. So if it's a classic button up, instead of buttoning it all the way up, you can still get a casual feeling if you like roll up the sleeves and let it be open, like few of the buttons open. Um, so it's kind of similar to the 3-word method, and I think it all comes down to like figuring out the framework and the building blocks and the specific keywords for your personal style. And then again, like tweaking, like figuring out how much of each of them needs to, like how much space do they all need to take up in your wardrobe to be able to, again, appreciate your wardrobe as a whole and feel like that represents you. But also when you style the outfits, that you can arrange the pieces in a way where individual, like that, so that they suit your mood, but they also, feel right with your personality.
I'm curious how you guys use your 3 words when you're shopping. Like, for example, does the piece have to embody all 3 of those words together, or is it okay if they embody one? How do you use it to help guide when you want to add something to your wardrobe?
That's such a good question. I usually use them when I'm on the fence about something. So if it's like I use them as the tiebreaker pretty much, because I'm so picky already when it comes to adding things to my closet. So if I'm on the fence, I'll say, okay, let's bring it back to my 3 words. I usually consider classic. I think I have a more dominant word, and classic also aligns with my slow fashion values, which is longevity over anything. So I'll always ask myself, like, okay, is this classic? Minimal, maybe. Minimal is a big one too. And then undone, I worry less about that one because it is more about the styling, because I know I can kind of achieve whatever through styling. Um, but for example, there was a dress that I was going through. A friend's, her mom and her were giving away some clothes, and I was helping them decide like what to consign and what to donate. And there was this dress, oh, I don't have it here, but it's like a peasant dress. It has poofy sleeves, but it's beige, so it's very minimal. And I would say it's like it is pretty classic. It's like an A-line silhouette, poofy sleeve, square neckline. And I remember thinking, okay, this is like minimal. It's not very, it's a bit fussy for me, but I could wear it with like a simple pair of flats or whatever and do my hair and it'll be undone. And I thought I would give it a try. And I can't wear it. Like I wore it in a video and I was like, oh, like,
I saw the sneaker
yes,
video, right?
yeah, in the sneaker video. And I was like, no, yeah, it really doesn't work. Like and so I don't know, maybe I'm contradicting our point of like the 3 words failing you, but like maybe I should have put more of a focus on the classic or the undone piece there. For me, maybe I was thinking it was more classic in a literal sense, but not classic for me. And I think maybe that brings us to a whole other point of your 3 words is like they also have to resonate with what that means for you, right? Like that's not my classic. That's maybe
Yeah, like, and like I would have interpreted that dress as being a dominant word, bohemian.
yeah, bohemian or
Or
romantic.
mhm.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think it's a great example that it's not always straightforward. Like there will be pieces that are hybrid between different ones.
Mhm.
So it all comes down to, like you say, Christina, how you perceive it, or like, you know, finding a way that you can still see yourself in that piece, although it might be a little bit outside of what you would usually go for.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. The other reason why, oh yeah, because I often tend to break out my 3 words also into like elements. So like silhouette, the proportions, color, texture, all that kind of thing. And because it's pretty stiff, like it's like a stiffer cotton, I was like, great. Like I love structured pieces. This will be fine. Like it's a silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fabric and everything that I'm familiar with, that I'm comfortable in. So it's tricky. It's tricky. So I don't know if that was a good. I think maybe it is a good example because we can all make
Yeah, I think
mistakes.
it's always
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really nice to hear like your thought process. I find that really
Yeah.
helpful, actually, very inspiring.
Mm,
I think it's cool how you like for like because for me again, I immediately would have just we'll leave the video linked in the show notes if you guys want to see it. Um, but for me, my immediate thought would have been to describe that dress as bohemian, but I like how you actually took it and thought about how like what it does have some of those elements, but maybe the overall like the like talking about the dominant or the dialing, like the dominant still feeling and descriptor was still bohemian, which was away from your style
yes.
words, which is probably why it fell off.
Yeah.
So it's like we like tried to make it work, but it
Yeah.
overtook.
And I think too, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I often think our own personalities come into play,
Mhm.
and because it technically it's like this kind of goes back into our body series, right? Like it's a flattering dress, it looks pretty on, and even the girls I was with
Mhm.
when we tried it on were like, oh my god, it looks so great. But like me personally, my it's too much. Like I think I'm already,
Mm.
my personality is already like a lot, and I think that's why I like the minimal, because it kind of balances out my
Mhm.
personality. So a lot of times, so I think it's interesting how the 3 words, how choosing one that takes your own essence into consideration could be very beneficial.
Mm.
um
Yeah, that's
yeah,
very deep. I love that
sorry.
perspective.
Always come
No, that I
right in
love that. Yeah.
there. I don't know. Yeah.
But I definitely use them as well, like in a similar way, like as a way to ensure, especially like, yeah, certainly when buying something new, but definitely also when putting together an outfit. Like I think, one thing is buying a piece and like being really excited about wearing that, but it's a whole other story than actually using and utilizing your clothes and like styling them and figuring out how to put things together. Um, and I think for me, I definitely use them a lot, like in everyday styling as well, like just to make sure
Mhm.
it suits the situation and my mood when I wake up in the morning. And like you said, Christina, like, okay, well, if I'm going to a concert, maybe I want to like dial up the inner rock chic that I have somewhere hidden inside of me. And that's what makes it really fun, I think. It's
Yeah,
a fun
it's
place to
dynamic.
explore. Yeah.
Yeah,
Even without shopping, like you can have so much fun with that.
100%. I just think it's interesting that like I would say all of our 3 words are fairly similar. Like they're just different like if like how you talked about pulling out the thesaurus and um finding different words to describe I think ultimately the same thing. Like Alyssa, you say classic minimal undone and I say minimal relaxed classic, I guess, so but our styles I would say are completely different. So
Hmm.
I really think that's interesting how like even if you have the same 3 words, you can still interpret it and put that look together and even find pieces that may all embody those 3 words, but look it end up resulting in a completely different style and look.
Yeah, and at the same time, the different keywords take up different amounts of space in your
Yeah.
wardrobe as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, Christina, too, about yeah, I think that's a really beautiful point about how it can be interpreted differently. And I think that's so important for, again, kind of bringing it into the slow fashion conversation, where comparison is such a trigger, I find, for overconsumption. And it's so easy for us to see someone online or whatever, a celebrity or whatever, whose style is very similar to our own. So we think, great, I'm going to emulate this. I'm going to buy that piece. I'm going to wear it the same way. And then you get home and you're like, why don't I feel like myself? Or like, why don't I feel as cool as the person who was wearing the piece in the first place? And I think that's because we have tried to copy without the creativity behind it and without owning and asserting that our own personal essence behind the piece. So I love how you mentioned how you talked about that, about how like everyone interprets it differently, and I think it's not to be overlooked. I think that's a really important piece.
And I think like with Signe, you talk a lot about your style persona and how finding your style is part of identity work. And I think that really ties in nicely because again, like maybe you see something as inspiration and you try it on for size for yourself and it ultimately doesn't feel like you. And I think this is where you really have to own knowing yourself because I think, you know, I think like at least in my own experience, like I feel like when I shopped, I was always trying to be somebody else. Like this leans back into our conversation about the fantasy self that we had in a previous episode. And it's like you really have to find ways to own and accept who you are. And I think that's when you finally do that and embrace it, that's when I think that's when clothes on your body and your style starts to feel really like home and like and converse to that when something doesn't feel like you know with certainty and you have this like immediate gut reaction where it's like nope, not me, too much this, not part of my style. So I think it really just comes down to like acceptance and knowing who you are and just really owning that.
I'm kind of on the fence because I know that we change over time as humans. Like, I'm definitely not the same person I was a year ago, but I do feel like there are certain elements that have been inherent in my personal style or just me for all of eternity. Do you think it's more of a matter like how do you manage, I guess this is just to both of you, how do you manage your three words changing? Do you think there's always one that remains constant? Like I feel like classic will remain my constant. Like I remember going to university, it was first year, and I wore on my first day of school a button-up shirt. I didn't even know. Do you know what I mean? I wore a button-up shirt and a pair of high-waisted boot-cut trousers. And I remember I was like, I love this. I feel good. And like, I would wear that today, but I'm not the same person. But like those elements, that crispness, the tailoring, like I guess I've always liked it. So I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think, looking back on your past selves, would you say your three words have changed?
It's kind of funny because I'm actually working on a video of my style evolution. So I've been looking at photos like of me as a kid and like
Cool.
grade 8, high school. And yes, the style is different, but I think the through line is still there. I almost feel like the three words are like a constant thing. And maybe there's like Amy Smilovic talks about having you have your three words, which are fair. I don't know if she says that they're fairly constant, but you have she adds in a fourth element called a modifier. So it's like your adverb. So the action or something to describe the adjective that you can pepper in. So maybe mine, like, you know, if I'm chill, modern, classic, my modifier might be edgy. And I feel like maybe that modifier is something that changes.
Yeah.
Although, like, looking back for me, I'm like, I don't know. I've always been like, my parents were bikers. So, like,
Cool.
I feel like edgy has always been in my style. Like, to me, it feels constant. It's almost just like the style and like the silhouettes of the clothes and stuff changes. But for me personally, I can say it's been constant. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the same for me. Like classic might be something I've only started to explore now, like in my like late 20s and into the early 30s now. Like a more like a, I don't know, grown up kind of style. But definitely like casual, and I think edgy also is something I feel like like in high school, like I went to, like I had music on like that was one of my majors, and we've always like listened like a lot to music, like in my family, and a lot of us can play like instruments and stuff, and I feel like that's always been a really like big interest for me. So I think that's where like the edgy interest kind of comes from. Like it's, yeah, it's funny, I've never thought about that, but I think, yeah, that definitely some things that I've held on to through the years. But then it, like you say, Christina, some of the silhouettes might have changed, or even just like, you know, in high school, edgy, like I really loved this, I wouldn't say emo, but kind of like this
Yeah.
Avril Lavigne kind of, you know, vibe. So
Makes sense.
it was more like a bigger part of my wardrobe at the time, whereas now it's only a small part of my
Did
wardrobe.
you
So
wear
it's
the ties?
the one. No, I
The
no.
ties are like the socks on your hands
No,
that
I
are like
didn't.
full Avril.
Yeah, I had like a small part of it in me back then, like a subtle part, and so I guess in that sense, it's still, I don't know, it's still a part of me today. It's kind of funny,
Hmm.
but then mixed with something a bit more grown up and adult at the same time.
Yeah.
Would you say that
Yeah.
your 3 words, either of you, have helped like reduce your consumption of fashion, or has it kind of stayed the same?
I will say that it probably has. Like, it's not like I've kept track, but it's been easier for me to leave out the noise. Like, I still follow people on Instagram who, you know, I admire them so much for their style. And like maybe 10 years ago, I would have gone out and just bought all the same things, just, you know, for the sake of looking like them or dressing like them. It's easier for me today to leave out that noise and be like, yeah, well, it's not for me. So it definitely has prevented me from buying clothes that is just not right for me.
Yeah, I think it helps like sort of weed out and vet like what I know I'm going to wear. So in that way I think it helps make those shopping decisions. And so it helps me sort of figure out like what are some unique or interesting things that I can bring in now that still speak to those style words, but that are also not completely out of left field.
Great. I love that.
Yeah.
Before we end, if you neither of you have anything else, I don't know. I just really want to know what instrument Signe learned.
Yeah.
Piano. I've been
Beautiful.
playing piano since I was about 8. I haven't played for years, but and then guitar. But I'm a horrible guitar player.
So cool. You two are so cool. Like,
Oh my God, you're so
gosh.
cool.
No, I don't know. Bikers, musicians. I love it. I love it. So cool.
Thank you so much for joining in our conversation this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple and leave us a rating and review. It's one of the best ways to support the Sustain This podcast at zero cost to you.
We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topic requests, or even guests you want to hear from, please send us a DM on Instagram at sustainthis_podcast. We read all of our comments and look forward to hearing from you.
We hope you join us again next Tuesday, where we'll talk about so much more than clothes. Ciao!